I'm Tina Garcia, and we're here to talk about my experience with Berkshire Life Insurance Company that later became Guardian Life Insurance Company. Well, when I took the policy out, I was very successful, and my entire business was based on contracts. And I presumed, I did my due diligence. I made sure that the company was financially sound. I had CPAs, accountants representing that this was a great company. I disclosed to Berkshire and my health, my personal health, the health of my parents and my siblings was required. And bottom line is Berkshire had 2 years in which they could investigate anything about me, my income, my family, and they did. They investigated, they made sure, they got tax returns. They knew that my income was at the top levels. That's why they sold me the policy. They also knew that not only had I never been sick, I had never taken any prescription drugs. Berkshire went out and talked to my family physician. Berkshire knew that my parents were in excellent physical health. And so, yes, I had an expectation. I relied on this company based on the strength, the financial strength, the rating that they had as an annuity, investment, life, disability insurance company, but also based on the fact that the contract was so solid. There was no basis. If I paid the premiums after 2 years, there was no reason whatsoever that they could not pay claims because I was a shareholder. And in fact, what happened is when I was disabled, when I was the most vulnerable, not only did Berkshire fail to pay claims, but they came after me with every gun that you can imagine. Essentially, they used my premiums that I'd paid because I was fully vested in the company. They used my own premiums against me by hiring, it had to be disclosed, they hired private detectives 24/7 for years at a time. They went after my family. During the litigation, Berkshire deposed 22 people associated with my case. The burden was not just on the doctors that they deposed and treated like criminals, but my family was essentially attacked. My brother was deposed twice. My parents were subpoenaed, and the person that went to deliver the subpoena made it clear to my parents, who are elderly now, that they would not only have to testify in the case, but they had to prove, my father had to prove that he was an American citizen. My mother had to prove her tribal heritage. My daughter was asked to prove that she was an American citizen. My children, of course, like myself, we were born in this country. I served my country in the United States Air Force during Vietnam, was admirably discharged. For Berkshire to challenge the fact that we are not Americans was just despicable, and it caused a great deal of hardship on the family. It was a situation where it became your worst nightmare just to try to enforce your rights. Just making copies of the documents that had to be supplied to Berkshire. It's estimated, and Berkshire does admit this on the record, that the documents that I submitted, rather than the simple postcard that was required, Berkshire admits that I submitted over 5,000 pieces of paper to show and that I was disabled, and ultimately their own expert said that I was. And so this disability has been not just a nightmare for me personally, for my family, for my doctors, but also it's a nightmare because right now, for instance, I have to have a life-threatening surgery. I don't have the resources for that. I'm already a burden on the Social Security rolls. And now Medicare is going to have to pay an estimated $100,000 so that I can have a surgery that's necessary to reconstruct my neck because of the combined effects of 2 negligent drivers. Berkshire knows this. Berkshire knew, according to my doctor's testimony, that I was seriously disabled way before I did because I just kept trying to get better, no matter what the prognosis was. In 1991, I was the president of Special Properties Incorporated. Special Properties was a business that did real estate, housing development, just helping military transferees buying and selling a property. In 1991, my company had already been tremendously successful. I was doing what a lot of single parents do. I was trying to run a company and get the company to expand, but I had 2 children, and I also had 4 other children that I was caring for in the foster care system, and I had my parents and my siblings and my family. So as the company became more and more successful, I understood the need for having a retirement benefit plan that covered life insurance and, in the event of disability, would allow my company to continue to run. And the company running was how I was going to care for my children. Initially, I worked to develop a retirement benefit plan that was certified by the Internal Revenue Service. Now, the reason you do that is because as a business owner, this is part of the business continuation plan. So I made sure, and my financial planner, CPA, accountants all made sure that we had, first and foremost, we had a plan that met the IRS directives to be a qualified plan for not just me, but for all of my employees. And then once we had the benefit plan in place, then mostly my CPA accountants went out and interviewed companies. Chuck Hermanic, who has been instrumental with the development of my company, helped and narrowed down the field, and the 2 of us discussed the benefits of having a policy with Berkshire, and ultimately we went with Berkshire Life Insurance Company. In the sales material, the whole premise of these policies was that the Berkshire policy was within the qualified retirement plan. And what that meant, you can see here, is the guarantees the company was making as to why I should go with their qualified plan. And because, as they say, essentially it's a pension or profit sharing plan, and the contributions are approved for federal income tax deductions. Also, if there needs to be a lump sum distribution, for instance, in the event that I decided just to take out all of the funds that I had paid into the Berkshire retirement plan. Let's say that I wanted to, vastly expand the company and I needed to do that. Well, under the Berkshire policy, if I was selected, then I became a shareholder, and in addition to having the premiums being able to be written off as a qualified IRS plan, then I could borrow money from the plan. I also chose this policy because it had a disappearing premium. And what that meant was, for the first 13 years, I paid a very, very high front-loaded premium. But by doing that, in the 13th year, my policy was totally paid up and there were no more premiums due. So that was a very big incentive for me too. And you can see that as I'm paying down the premiums, the value of my life insurance policy is also going up. So this was all part of the retirement benefit annuity plan. I also liked the idea that having the original Berkshire material, you can see that this type of plan protected me against known risk, like in the event that I died, then there would be enough money to take care of running the company at least for a couple of years until there could be a succession plan. My children would be taken care of, the payroll would be met, but also if I was disabled, then the policy provides that as long as one doctor says that I'm disabled, then I will receive disability income benefits. This is the policy, the actual original policy, and this title of the policy is a limited edition executive income replacement disability income policy. And as I understand it, this policy is not provided anymore. For one reason, Berkshire is a mutual insurance company. And what that means is before I could be given this policy or any other policy, I submitted an application for the policy, and the application becomes part of the policy. And it shows what my income is. I think as importantly is the Berkshire's own agent wrote this part of the application to explain that I'd been in real estate for 8 years, I'd been a broker for 5 years, that I employed the agents that worked for me, and by including the policy or the application into the Berkshire policy, there could be no questions about what was I doing at this particular period of time, because Berkshire had 2 years to investigate or challenge anything that I wrote on this application. And after 2 years, the policy became totally non-cancelable, and there could be no questions about any claim that was made. The employer pays the premiums, because this is a benefit for the company as well as the people that are employed by the company and by my children. What this also includes is presumptive total disability. And that's important because if one doctor was to say that I was disabled, then it was important that Berkshire or no one else could come back and challenge that doctor's disability rating. On the back of the policy, we see here that under this type of policy, by virtue of this policy, and I'm quoting, the owner is a member of the Berkshire Life Insurance Company. As such, the owner can vote either in person or by proxy at any annual meeting. The annual meetings are held at the home office on the first Monday in April of each year. As a shareholder, I'm entitled to dividends. I am entitled to attend the meetings and to vote. And so that was important to me also, to know that in the event that I became disabled and I needed to use this policy, that I would not have the risk of being challenged by an insurance company. As an owner, that was guaranteed. And so that was very important to me. On the front page of the policy, it says here that no one can cancel the policy other than me. And I have to advise the company in writing if I want to cancel the policy. And if I do that, Berkshire is required to reimburse all of the payments that I'd originally paid in. This is important because, remember, this is part of a retirement benefits plan. And if this policy that's also represented to be an annuity, that there would be no risk whatsoever. Even if I would have become disabled after 2.5 years, for instance, the policy provisions specifically state that if you become disabled, I paid an additional $8 on my premium so that in the event that I became disabled, premiums were waived. The other added rider that is on my policy is that in the event that I was injured in an accident, then my benefits did not terminate at age 65. If I was injured in an accident, then the policy provides that my benefits will be extended for the rest of my life. Now, my benefits were $5,530 a month. That amount is tax-free to me because I paid taxes on the money under the premium situation. So what happens is, as I become older and the policy is fully vested, well then when I become disabled, and I'm disabled by a car accident, then Berkshire's liability, their commitment to me, goes past the age of 65. It is extended for the rest of my life. In 2002, I was rear-ended by a negligent driver. At the time, I suffered brain injury. I had a great deal of challenges with cognitive processing. Memories were very difficult, fragmented, and I had pain issues associated with injuries to my neck and my spine. And at that time, when I made a claim, Berkshire refused to pay. They didn't deny the claim. They just refused to pay, saying that they had to have a lot more information than the simple postcard that was all that I was told was required to make a claim. Well, what we had in 2002 was we had doctors saying this is a traumatic brain injury. We had a hospital saying that there was a concussion. I really did the best I could with working with Berkshire and providing them all of the doctor's reports, all of the medical scans showing the head injury. And Berkshire kept insisting that they wanted me to give up the policy. They would pay the back benefits that they owed me, but only if I agreed to relinquish the policy. I didn't want to do that. I mean, at that point, I was close to 50. I was being told that I had a brain injury. I didn't want to believe that. I'd been working essentially since I was 12 years old. I felt if Berkshire would have at least honored the policy, then I could have had the peace of mind that I needed. I had a son in college at the time. It was definitely a very difficult hardship. Berkshire withheld benefits. I ultimately had to file a suit in 2004. And unfortunately, Berkshire had the case removed from court by misrepresenting a false policy, submitting a false policy, not my actual policy. I was operating at a disadvantage because after acquiring a head injury, it was very difficult for me to remember the type of policy I had. I could not locate my policy, the actual policy. When I requested a substitute policy from Berkshire, Berkshire claimed that they too had lost my policy, and they provided a sample policy. But Berkshire removed the case from Denver court to federal court, claiming diversity of citizenship. And what that means is I was a citizen of Colorado. Berkshire claimed that they were citizens of Massachusetts, and Guardian at that time, Berkshire had already merged with Guardian. Guardian was a citizen of New York. Now, that is a fraud on the court because under Colorado statutes, an insurance company that is a mutual insurance company is considered a citizen of every state. And so because there was no basis to remove to federal court, then the federal court decision was invalid. After the court case had been filed, and after I went through a long period of cognitive training, then I was able to piece together parts that had been missing. For instance, I became aware of the policy's connection to my business retirement plan. I had totally forgotten about that. And then fortunately, I actually located the original policy in the original jacket with all the sales material. And so I had another piece of the puzzle there that I could realize and read and say, wait a minute, this is different. This is substantially different than the policy that Berkshire submitted to the court to change the jurisdiction that was so harmful to me, because essentially I was tied up in federal court on a false basis for over 5 years while I was waiting for the only financial resources that I had at the time. The totality of Berkshire's fraud wasn't apparent until we had the actual policy. We had the actual IRS documents saying this is part of a retirement benefit plan. And then we went to Chuck Hermanic, fortunate for me, who is still in Virginia, still has vast recall of my company's situation and why he purchased the policy. And he was able to explain what the actual policy clearly showed. By that point, I'd had 9 doctors certify and give deposition testimony that not only was I severely disabled, but that Berkshire's fraudulent actions, and these are the words from the doctors, Berkshire's fraudulent actions made my condition so much worse that these 9 doctors certified I was disabled. And then Berkshire said, well, I would like for you to consider a settlement if you will go to our doctor and let that doctor determine if you're disabled. Well, even though it wasn't necessary for the policy, and of course by this time I didn't trust them at all, I went to see their doctor, who, as it turned out, wasn't even a physician. The policy requires a physician to make a determination if there's a disability. Berkshire sent me to a psychologist, Dr. Taylor, from here in Denver. And Dr. Taylor did a neuropsych evaluation and issued a report that agreed with all the other doctors that I was totally disabled and that I had been disabled by injuries, not just a brain injury, but the brain injury was part of my disability. So Berkshire paid in 2007. They started paying the monthly benefits. Now, the amount that was not paid from 2003 to 2007, over $300,000, they did not go back and pay because they claimed that the court process allowed them to change the terms of the policy. And of course, that's not possible. A court, most people aren't aware of this, but a court cannot change the terms of a policy, period. But in this particular case, the court had no jurisdiction anyway. I became aware of the Colorado Brain Injury Trust Fund and applied and was found to be significantly disabled. I believe that I was approved for the Brain Injury Trust Fund approximately 2008. The $2,000 that was given to me by the trust fund allowed me to acquire cognitive training, and that was incredibly beneficial. But it also gave me the resources to have a SPECT brain imaging scan done, and that was a baseline. It was a baseline that would be used and can be used to show how much cognitive process I was able to make with neurogenesis, for instance. And I was in the process of tremendous progress when I was rear-ended the second time in '09. In '09, another SPECT scan showed that there was an even greater area of damage in one side of my brain that was subject to seizures, and my condition went from being a chronic condition to a life-threatening condition. When I notified Berkshire and provided them with the doctor's report, Berkshire started to insist that unless I would agree to modify my contract, then they would not continue to pay claims. I ultimately decided not to modify the contract. I knew that my rights and my benefits would not go away. Unfortunately, I still am in a dilemma for how to enforce those benefits. And so I have help and support from the Department of Social Security, because when I was forced to apply for Social Security benefits, when Berkshire didn't pay, then Social Security determined that I was 100% totally disabled and would be for the rest of my life based on injuries from the 2002 accident and the life-threatening component of the 2009 accident. All along, since Berkshire quit paying benefits in October of '09, I've been submitting documents to Berkshire, and they're just ignored. Part of the issue is that Berkshire merged with Guardian, and my policy, my shareholder rights, were transferred to Guardian Life Insurance Company. Unfortunately, in my case, Berkshire failed to notify Guardian that I was a shareholder at the time of the merger. I have the letters from Berkshire to me in 2000 saying, "Dear policyholder, these are the reasons why you need to vote for the merger, and your entitlement in your contract will be fully honored and transferred, and since you're entitled to dividends as a shareholder, any dividends, you would be entitled to." So I did vote for the merger. But because Berkshire failed to list me as a shareholder, then when I inquire and try to get Guardian to help me with my claim, Guardian comes back and says, "We have no record of you on our shareholder rolls." What Guardian did do was they reinvigorated Berkshire Life. They created a new Berkshire Life, kept the new company at the same address as the old Berkshire Life, and then entrusted the new Berkshire Life to manage the claims for all of Guardian. And so what it does is it sets up a barrier, and it very clearly isolates Guardian, because here I have an entitlement under Guardian that Guardian's responsible for, but I don't have a Guardian policy number. And therefore, when I write to Guardian, Guardian comes back and says, "You need to go through Berkshire Life Insurance Company, and you need to have a Guardian claim number." And I don't have one, because Berkshire failed to honor their shareholder obligations to me and put me on the rolls. Now I can prove that I was on the rolls by their own documents, and the fact that after the merger, Berkshire paid claims. Entitlement has never been an issue. It's just been enforcing my rights. I want to thank people for listening to my challenges with Berkshire Life Insurance Company and Guardian Life Insurance Company. I'd like to encourage people to contact me at the addresses listed on the screen. If you have been unsuccessful in getting your claims paid, if Berkshire's just not denying your claim, or Guardian, if they're just withholding your benefits or trying to get you to renegotiate your policies, or if they're not paying dividends. As shareholders, we're entitled to dividends. And if Guardian and Berkshire are showing you or telling you that they don't have dividends, which is what they told me, then I would just like to point out that according to the Wall Street Journal, by their own full-page ad, there are dividends to be distributed to the shareholders. And I would just like people to feel that collectively, if we stick together, then we have a lot better chance at enforcing our contract rights, getting the dividends that we're entitled to, and working so that if anybody's thinking about buying a plan, a retirement plan, a disability plan from Guardian or Berkshire Life, that we can work to try to encourage people not to do that. And if we have policies that are not being paid, that Berkshire and Guardian are just arbitrarily withholding just the contract benefit terms, then we need to work together. And collectively, I believe we're all either going to be part of the problem or part of the solution. This problem is not going to go away unless we stand up, and we do that collectively.